Hello, and we are live. Welcome to the show. So I'm joined today by a very special guest, Mr. Sam Overton from
Hello.
Fluid Social. Good to see you, mate. How are you?
Yeah, good to finally talk, man. We've talked a little bit when you were interviewing Tusk on your podcast, but yeah, it's good to come on here solo finally. Yeah, I mean, as we were just saying, things are good. I'm in bright sunshine, Rio de Janeiro, and yeah, life is amazing over here, man.
Fantastic stuff, mate. I'm very envious. And I want to actually talk a bit about Brazil and Rio in particular as we go into this. We're also talking about social anxiety as well, which is a key thing for me and the guys that I serve. But before we crack into it, did you want to just introduce yourself to the viewers, just say a bit about, who you are, how you got into this space and etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I have a business called Fluid Social, where essentially I'm helping. I mean, I think we're all working in much the same space, right? I'm helping guys essentially build up the confidence to go out and approach and meet women in the best way that they can, right? Politely, respectfully. And I tend to be focused more on environments, right? Like if you're looking for a certain type of woman, it's better to go to a certain type of environment. If you're interested in a certain type of thing, use your preferences to your advantage, right? Rather than this sort of shotgun approach that I think the last 10 years has given us in this space, where it's just like, go anywhere and approach everyone. It's like, no, you can actually be a little more directed and focused on what you're actually looking for and thus where you're going to go in order to be most effective. But my background is, I mean, I've been working in this space essentially for 8 years.
Right.
When I was still at university and I was 19 years old, I'm 27 now, I started working with students who had learning difficulties, autism spectrum disorders, and I worked as a social skills coach. So I would essentially help students with Asperger's syndrome to adapt to life at university. And so my job was to sit with them in lectures, dinners, go to parties with them, and essentially monitor their social behavior, create a report of that behavior, and then create a syllabus to work on how they can improve certain behaviors or errors in communication that they're making. And so I worked in that space for about 1.5 years. And it was, that's where I learned essentially the education side of this, how to actually teach. But then I felt like there was a sort of glass ceiling. I still work with some students with learning difficulties now, but I felt like, if people with learning difficulties can be helped to improve their social skills, then for sure neurotypical guys can as well, right? Guys who don't have any serious social blockages, they need the help too. And actually the potential for education in neurotypical men is much higher. There isn't that same glass ceiling. And so, I started creating my own space, helping guys to build up the confidence to actively focus on improving their social skills. It wasn't primarily dating. But as I've gone, I found that I've never really tried to direct my branding in one way or the other. I've just tend to find that the major part of my clientele has been guys who are looking to improve their sort of romantic side of their life. And so that's where I've primarily been over the last 3 years, increasingly in Brazil and Rio de Janeiro, sort of coming back to London for 6 months and then coming back here for 6 months. And so that's where I am right now.
No, fantastic. And out of perhaps you mentioned, but what were you studying at university?
I was studying history of art.
Oh, okay.
More than anything, I think is the vast majority of university students is the case, because you don't think of anything else to do, right? I mean, after school, it was this sense that you were always just being funneled into the next system of education, regardless of if you're really interested in it or if it's actually what's best for you. And so I studied history of art, but after a year, I was fairly certain that this was going nowhere, right? And so I essentially just started focusing on my own social life, going out and talking to women and looking for work in the space of social skills and social education. So I sort of sacked off my degree and just self-educated socially.
Yeah, no, fair enough. No, I was interested because it does seem like you've got this real understanding of, social dynamics, I suppose. And I was first introduced to you, I guess, by Tusk, by watching James obviously your friend,
yeah,
now a friend and a colleague of mine, and watching his stuff and then seeing you and then discovering some of your stuff as well. And what I've always liked about you is that I feel like you have this very thoughtful, quite respectful sort of attitude to all of this stuff, because obviously we are, because I suppose ultimately what I'm trying to do is similar to you in the sense, I mean, I see myself primarily as a writer. I've done a lot of blogging. I've written books about my experiences and stuff. But in terms of this sort of content that I'm doing, it's really about helping guys to overcome that social anxiety and to be more charismatic and to create opportunities for themselves, primarily in dating. So in that sense, it's kind of the same thing. But obviously we're in a space that is, has its grubbier elements, let's say. And I feel like you're very much distanced from that, which I really like.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always a challenge when you're working within an industry to not just follow what everyone else is doing, right? And take the status quo advice. And, I mean, I think one obstacle in this industry is terminology. There's so much archaic terminology that we've got to kind of unpack and say, right, well, should we actually be using this terminology? Should we be calling a couple of girls that we see in the street a two-set, right?
Yeah.
Should we call like talking to a girl with a guy friend? Should we frame it like we're alpha mailing him, amogging him? Or should we look at these people as people and use terminology that already exists in day-to-day lexicon without having to revert to this sort of CDPUA subculture terminology? And I think for me, I'm interested in words and literature as you are, and I understand the power that words have to actually change the way people think about things, right? And so for me, it's been a process of sort of deconditioning myself to think in terms of, pickup artist terminology and that very hyper red pill framework, and to say, no, look, we're just human beings acting in the world, acting in society, and where normal vocabulary exists to describe what we're doing, we should be using it. We shouldn't be isolating this group of people into a subculture. It's not necessary, and I don't think it's helpful.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I mean, let's be honest, it's not 2004 anymore, is it? Or 2005? No. I mean, all of that stuff is the pickup lexicon. I think we're talking about.
Yeah,
it's dated anyway, and there's not without reason people will almost ridicule it now. It's this idea of it's some guy wearing a feather boa and a top hat and going to the club with a flashing t-shirt and stuff. And not that. Not that either of us did that in any case, but it's sort of like we need to move on from those early cliches. And I don't think, this isn't even from my point of view, this isn't even coming from a woke sort of perspective. From my sense of this isn't like, we should, it's not coming from that sort of perspective. It's just coming from a human perspective, because ultimately, what's this about? It's about interacting with other human beings.
Exactly. If you've already isolated yourself as the guy that does approaches, then you've cut yourself off from most of society who aren't in that world, right?
Yeah.
And I think the art of, I guess, the modern man in today's society, which, as we both know, is not free from risks, right? Even social interaction can have its risks today.
Yes.
And so if you're operating in this world, the more you can integrate yourself into normal society while still acting in the way that you should and in the way you want, that's the balance that you should strike, right? Not totally isolating yourself and not, as you said, adopting this woke perspective and assuming that any conversation between a man and a woman is sexual harassment or some sort of affront. It's about understanding what you need to be doing as a man, whilst also acting in society as a member of society. I think that's the balance.
Well, I think as well. I mean, I don't want to get too sort of political or anything with this, but let's not. But I do think we kind of need to reclaim normal social interactions a little bit here, because obviously 100%. There's been a bit of negative press for various reasons.
Yeah.
And it suddenly, particularly male-female interactions, can suddenly start to look a bit suspect and a bit And that shouldn't be the case, right? Because we're all social animals. We should be free to go out and communicate and get together and have a great time together, right? I mean, surely that is what humanity is all about.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's obviously, I'm of the same opinion as you. I think for me, it's something that's easy to overlook. But I mean, the one special thing about coming out here to Brazil is that none of that culture exists here. It's never considered problematic to go and have a conversation with someone, right?
Yes.
And feminism exists here. It's not to say that, you know, they're in the dark ages as far as, you know, feminism and I guess culture is concerned. But feminism here is like, they have real problems with women, right? They have real domestic abuse problems. They have real issues between men and women here. And so feminism here is about creating that inequality between men and women. It doesn't bleed into social life, right? A man approaching a woman isn't taboo here. It's completely normal. A woman approaching a man is not taboo here. It's completely normal.
Yeah.
This social gene is so strong here in Brazil that it's almost easy to forget that it's different elsewhere. And I think that's one of the greatest blessings of somewhere like Latin America, is that they just think from a human perspective about this stuff, and they don't get wrapped up in society's cul-de-sacs.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. I think a lot of what we're talking about is really in the Anglosphere in particular, isn't it? So the United States, probably Canada, and then the United Kingdom. That's kind of and it's a shame because, like, I think a year of lockdowns and stuff. I mean, what's it taught us other than that? You know, human interaction is the most important thing of all. And I think when it gets politicized, it's a great shame. But anyway. Not to bang on about that too much. Maybe we just chat about Brazil a little bit, because I'm really keen to. I mean, I was going to try and get over there. I haven't yet this year. But So you're in Rio now. So talk us through, how did you first end up going to Brazil, and what? I know there's some stuff in the background. So why are you there now? And you know, what's your relationship to the country, if you like?
Yeah, well, I'll try and do the potted version of that, because that would take an hour in itself. But essentially,
I'll just sit back. It's all right.
Well, I met Tusk about 3 years ago, and when I met, we were both working for the same company. Actually, we were both working for Kezi and Noble at the time, and we worked together on one particular bootcamp, one particular course. And so after working together, we went and had a drink together, and he said to me, essentially, so I'm traveling around the world this year, starting with Brazil. I said, that sounds good. And he says, do you want to come? I said, yeah. And we booked our flights the same day, wrapped it up, and we did Rio Carnival together, I think in 2018 or 2017. I think it was 2018. And Brazil sort of shocked me in a way that no country ever has before.
Right.
Because I came here and I just saw this social culture straight away. I saw beautiful women who were openly expressing their, I suppose, you know, sexuality and their social side, right? They were being openly expressive, looking at you and not being afraid to look at you, not looking away when you looked back. There was no awkwardness or weirdness. There was amazing landscape. You know, you can see some of the mountains in the background here.
Yeah.
Beautiful beaches, water, friendly people. And so it had this feel of the perfect holiday location, right? The beaches, the nature, the people, the fun, the parties. But what I'd never experienced before was that there was actually also a functioning business-focused city behind it as well, right?
Right.
And I've been in business cities. I've lived in London. And I've been to holiday locations, but I'd never had the two coalesce into one sort of perfect harmony of like the perfect holiday and the perfect place to work and live at the same time. And so I was really enamored by Rio, right? And there's there's that dangerous element as well, that adventure that I liked as well. And so what I said was, I went back home and was desperate to come back. And I said, right, I'm going to advertise a course in Rio de Janeiro for one client, 2 weeks. And if someone books it, then I'm going to book my ticket for 6 months and stay here for 6 months. I put it up the same day someone booked the course, and that was it. So I came back to Rio for 6 months.
Nice.
yeah, and the rest is sort of history. So I've been back and forth from Rio to London, spending summer over there and spending winter over here. Since then, I have a family here now as well. I've got a baby here who's a year and a half old. He's in the living room. Actually, I'm just outside. And so, yeah, obviously I have other incentives as well, but life's been kind to me in many ways.
No, fantastic. That's amazing. I have to confess, it's a place that I've yet to go to. Although I do have actually a good friend of mine, kind of a mentor figure actually. Who has a home in Rio, and he spends a lot of the time in the United States or in Europe indeed. But he does spend quite a lot of the year in Rio as well. So I do want to get over there at some point. But yeah, man, I mean, fantastic. Like the culture, it just sounds absolutely fantastic. Obviously, the women are beautiful. It
must friendly, man. They make you feel good about approaching, right? That people are receptive. So it's not just that people are beautiful, right? There's beautiful women. It's that for guys that don't feel confident approaching women, women make you feel good about doing the approach here. You know, it sounds a bit soft maybe, but I think that is a really big thing for a lot of guys. It's the sense that the one time they do work up the courage to do the approach, you shouldn't be dependent on the reaction of other people, but it's easy to say that, and it's not so easy to follow that instruction when you're new to this, right? And you don't have a lot of social experience. But one amazing thing about the people here is that they don't make you feel stupid for having done the approach, even if it doesn't go well. There's almost this sense of appreciation of the act in itself. And so I respect the social culture a lot here.
That's good, because you obviously don't get that in London, do you? If you approach the wrong girl and she's in a bad mood, she's not going to make you feel good about the approach, which is a shame. And you could argue, well, has our culture become a bit perverted in some way by politics and everything else? And probably, but let's not go too far down that road. But,
I think every woman has the right to respond in whatever way she wants, right? And it is our job as men to not take it personally, and certainly not to say something back to her, right? If you've made the approach, you're putting yourself in the position where she can say whatever she wants. You're the person that's made that move, right? So So she should have every right to respond however she wants within reason, right? Short of physical violence. However, it would be much nicer if people responded with patience and kindness, and more than that, with sort of respect, right? Made someone feel good about the act rather than shutting them down. And so, that is an amazing thing about here as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. And what are the best times of year to be there? Because is it all year round? Because you mentioned obviously coming back to London in the summer, but
well, I mean, the reason why I come back to London in the summer, from sort of usually April, May, June, July, August, September, I believe that for me, there's no better place in the world than London in sort of May, June, July to early August. Those summer months in London, I truly believe it's probably, it's hard to put an objective scale on it, but for me, it's my favorite city in the world. I just think the park life, right? When everyone's out, having a couple of beers in the parks, in groups, couple of girls together, couple of guys together, big group, having a picnic outside the pubs, that scene of London park life for me is the best in the world. And so I actually don't want to miss London in sort of May, June, July. But that's not to say that Rio is bad at that time of year. It's just a little bit less active and energetic, right? It's a little bit cooler. It's a little bit less vibrant on the beaches. And really, it's just New Year to Carnival. So the time period between early January, sort of January the 1st, because that's New Year's, and you have the biggest New Year's celebration in the world here in Rio, to Carnival, which usually runs between the middle of February to early March. That period of January, February, March over here is just unbelievable. Right. It's 30 plus degree heat, if you can handle the heat. Everyone out on the beach. It just feels like a 3-month holiday. So if you're someone that wants that real social immersion, just a complete break from reality, where you turn up in a place and it is just switched on socially, sexually. Then Rio de Janeiro between January and March is just an absolute blast.
Fantastic. What about the final quarter of the year? What about sort of October, November kind of time? Is that still good if people want, you know, to get somewhere sunnier, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's, to be honest, any time of year is good. You have a few rainy months. Well, we've actually had a bit of rain recently. Yeah. I don't usually. I'm trying to think if I spend October there normally. I've spent a couple. It's fine. I mean, for me, it's all kind of normal, right? I would recommend coming here any time of year, right? You're not going to be disappointed, unless you just catch a week of rain. But that can really happen at any time here. Yeah. But generally speaking, it's sort of 85-90% sunshine, blue sky. So yeah, I would just come over. But yeah, I would say January to March, January to early mid-March is the best time to be here for sure.
Good stuff. Good stuff. And I know you and James have touched on this in your shows, but people do worry about, you know, safety and crime and all of that stuff. What's the reality of that?
If you're someone that worries about that sort of thing, it might not be the best place to come, right? I mean, it's perfectly natural if you find yourself in a position of danger, right? You're walking down a street at night, there's no lights, there's no cars, and you see a group of 3 guys strutting towards you. Yeah. It's natural in every human being's mind to put your defense mechanism on and think, oh shit, right? Am I in trouble here? That's complete natural and necessary human instinct. But if you're someone that perpetually worries about risk to your life and danger and fear of that, it's probably not the best place to come. And that's not because there's a real risk. You know, I've lived here 2 years and I've never encountered anything. I've never been robbed. I've never been assaulted. I've probably had, I can count on one hand the amount of times I've felt in danger. And that again could just be my imagination saying, right, you're not in the best part of town. You're by yourself. There's not much traffic around and there's some guys over there. So, you know, I'm not even certain that I've even been in one position of risk. Whereas I have in London. I have in Nottingham. Yeah. And so what I'd say to people like that is like, there is no risk, or there is minimal risk if you come here and you're careful. And what I mean by careful is don't go to an area that you don't know by yourself at night if there's not light on the streets or loads of cars walking past, right? Yeah. Obviously don't do that. But if you know, if you do a bit of research, ask your friends that live here, ask me, like, is it safe to go here by myself, right? Or where should I be avoiding at night? I mean, even the favelas, some of the favelas aren't even dangerous during the day, right? You can walk around there and be absolutely fine because no one's going to rob you in the favela because they know the consequences of robbing a tourist who's potentially bringing money, bringing business to that part of town. If you rob that person, the cartels aren't going to put you in jail. They're going to do much worse than that. So the favelas aren't even dangerous, generally speaking, during the day for a foreigner to walk around. The only risk is that if there is a drug bust, right? If the police raid, which does happen across the board on a daily basis across all of the favelas, some of them are getting raided in the day. And if you get caught up in crossfire, you know, that's it. Yes. But I don't have many qualms about visiting Rocinha or Vidigal, the 2 favelas in Zona Sul, by myself, right? I would feel safe during the day walking around this. I mean, I do have some friends. I have some friends there as well, so I really have no reason not to feel safe. But I don't feel in danger doing that. Whereas if I'm in Copacabana, where everyone assumes to be the safest place, and I'm walking around the streets at 3 a.m. in the morning by myself, there's actually a real risk that something could happen if you walk down the wrong street. It's always a matter of perspective, isn't it, really? And like you say, I mean, if you think about London, there are areas of London where you probably don't want to be walking around at night. There are certainly areas in, you know, I used to live in Manchester, you know, Manchester, you don't really want to be walking around at night. And I mean, I wonder how much, as a British person, and probably as an American person as well, or wherever you're from, you're very insular in your culture, aren't you? And there's this idea, you're sort of told, oh, these places are dangerous and everything. But
when I think about it, I've lived in some quite dangerous places in the UK,
Yeah.
and I've always been, well, generally speaking, I've been all right. So,
yeah,
do you think that this? I don't know if it's intentional on the part of the media, but it certainly gets played up a bit, doesn't it?
it does. It does. I mean, it's not just our media though. It's, you know, Cariocas, people from Rio, for example, the people that live here where I'm staying right now, which is in the sort of west zone of Rio de Janeiro. They would be terrified. Most people here would be terrified to go to a favela. They would assume that stepping foot in a favela is certain death, right?
Yeah.
So in some ways, it's actually the tourists that come to visit Rio that have fewer fears, and that could be because they don't know the true reality of the city. But I think more than likely, it's because they're not exposed to the media over here, which is every day. That, you know, problems in this place, problems in that place. 3 people die in a shootout here. 3 people die here, and so they get this ingrained prejudice. Maybe is too strong a word, but this ingrained sense that anything outside of their little bubble is terribly dangerous. Whereas a tourist comes here and they have a thirst for adventure, and they realize that the reality is that 90% of people in any favela are good people, just trying to get by, just trying to live. And when you sort of, and I do advise that people don't take stupid risks, but get to know your environment, right? Take care, but do explore as much as you can, because you don't want to be walking around the city in which you live in any state of fear, right? If you're walking around your city feeling scared, you need to change your city, because that's terrible stress on the mind, right? The amount of cortisol that you're going to be releasing throughout the day, being scared, walking around, is just not worth it. So you're better off facing that fear, realizing that it's probably not that risky, taking minor risks and walking around fearlessly. That's what I would advise.
Yeah, it's really strange because I mean, actually, when you think about it, the number of stabbings there are in London. If you heard about that from the outside, you would think, well, Jesus, that sounds terrible, and it is terrible. But it's a city of 10 million people, 12 million people if you count the outskirts, and really, this is very minor. Really, not minor. But it's such a small proportion.
Relatively speaking, it's minor. It's tiny, but you know, I guess in London as well, it's very isolated to those few areas, isn't it? You can walk around Oxford Circus and never ever have a fear that you're going to be stabbed, right?
Although,
but if you go to Tower Hamlets, you're gonna have some level of fear there.
Although saying that, I was talking to somebody the other day was telling me that they knew, well, a girl who works in Harrods, and she was saying that a couple of her colleagues had got mugged in Knightsbridge.
Really?
Well, yeah, because there are people, obviously, they're targeting the more wealthy people and so on. So, you know, it could be tricky anywhere, really, but you've just got to keep your wits about you, really, and not buy into the fear. Just one final thing on Brazil. I guess guys are going to be wondering, is it as a place to go specifically to date, to meet women and so on? Is it sounds like it's a very amenable place from what you're saying. I mean, I think I've heard you and James saying that perhaps maybe British and American guys, you know, there's a certain appetite to or interest in meeting those guys. I mean, what would you say about that? Is it a good place to go if you're looking for this kind of experience?
Yeah, I'm going to speak honestly and perhaps a little carelessly, but I think I can't beat around the bush on it. It is an amazing place. People are super friendly to everyone. It's easy to make friends here as a foreigner, both with Brazilians and with other foreigners. It's a really amazing place to come. However, there is some level of superficiality. Well, there is everywhere, right? But in the dating market, there is no getting around the point that, you know, you or I have a huge advantage looking the way that we do in Rio de Janeiro, right? Because we stand out as obviously from another country. If you're a guy with darker skin, perhaps a guy from India or somewhere where the skin tone is a little darker, people may well assume that you're Brazilian, and you won't get any of the same initial advantages that someone with pale skin, blonde hair, and blue eyes has here, right? However, just as is the case in England, the looks only get you through the door. right? A girl might look at you and give you an indicator of interest. And a lot of guys who see good-looking guys get this indicator of interest think, oh, life's unfair, right? This guy has it so easy because he's good-looking. But really, in my experience, past the first 3 to 5 minutes maximum, she's forgotten what you look like, and your personality has formed a clearer image of who you are. And for women, this is much, much more solid than it is for men, right? Men are much more visual creatures, and so, you know, with women, looks are really important. The other way around, it's like the looks are important, yes, but as soon as she's recognized that, yes, you're good looking, but you've got nothing to say, you've got no confidence, you've got no chat, you've got no sense of humor, it doesn't matter what you look like. You're ugly to her because you've shown that you're holding terrible cards. And so, yes, it's easier for certain people, but in terms of the actual social atmosphere and making friends, it doesn't matter. You can. It's an amazing social culture, and Rio, there's this sort of idea called malandro, which is that sort of cocky, slightly arrogant, sexy sense of humor. I guess what we'd call the sort of bad boy stereotype in the UK, and that's something that's much more important even than looks. Is that you sort of play into this cheeky, don't take anything seriously. You're up for having a laugh. Like you don't take yourself too seriously. You're just playing around. That's something much more important to learn in the social context here. Is that the cool people in Rio, the people that do well in Rio, they're the guys that aren't taking themselves seriously. They're laughing a lot. They're making jokes. They're not chasing women too much. It's more like that. And so that's something that you can really learn over here as well, right? If you come here as someone who's a little bit tight and stiff and serious, you can actually learn to loosen up, right? You hang around people that are like that, and you sort of change yourself permanently or semi-permanently to be more relaxed, to have a more easy sense of humor, to be more cheeky and cocky, and that can be an amazing lesson.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a couple of points there. The first thing is that I was talking to Jack Napier this week about this very thing, which is the looks getting you through the door. Because I've had situations where the girl has just liked me, you know, like for whatever reason, I was her type. The girl just liked me. It was pretty clear. And so the looks part of it, in theory, is ticked off, right? Because physically, obviously, she liked you. But then I've messed it up. And this is obviously the past because now I'm, you know, all this practice and blah, blah, blah. No, I could probably still mess it up today. But like, even though the looks part of it was, okay, box ticked, if you go in and you're a bit dry, you haven't got anything to say, you come over as boring or whatever, she's going to kick you to the curb.
Yeah, it's game over.
Exactly. So I think that's a really interesting thing that guys, particularly these guys who are so obsessed with looks, and it's like, no, it's all about looks and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And yes, it helps if she likes the way that you look, but that's not going to take you the full way. But the other thing I wanted to ask you, and maybe this segues a bit into sort of social anxiety, is obviously I know you and Tusk, and you know you're running. You have students over there, probably students from like the UK or from America or from other Western countries, and they go out and they study with you for a period of time, and then they come back. And what I wanted to ask was, obviously, because the environment is very different, is that of value, the fact that they study with you in Rio, where perhaps things are a bit, not easier, but, you know, it's a bit more vibey, and then they come back to miserable old London? And I think from what you're saying, it does help to kickstart their, you know, their social experience, if you like. But what's your view on that?
It's a great question. It's a great question. I mean, I guess I'd address it to begin with by, you know, Tusk and I have actually just been traveling for a month up the east coast of Brazil. I think, where did we last talk? I think we were in Búzios, so we were somewhere when he spoke to you, but we've been traveling for the past month. And even for me, right, getting that space, destroying the anchors of everyday life. It doesn't matter where you are. If you're waking up in the same bed every day, walking down the same street, seeing the same people, hearing the same sounds, smelling the same smells, your mind begins to close and you begin to see your reality through this tiny lens that's based on the environmental factors of where you live.
Yeah.
And the way that you behave adapts to these anchors in your environment. For anyone in the world, breaking out of your environment, this is probably the main reason why traveling, I think, is so important, more so than education. I think it's that your mind is allowed to expand when you remove the anchors that fix you to one way of thinking when you stay in one environment. By traveling, your mind opens up. You have you have that beginner's mindset again, where everything is fresh and new, and you're a student again, right? Because you don't know this place. So you're a student in this place. You're learning it, right? Maybe the people communicate differently. You've got to adapt to how they communicate. Maybe you feel a little more nervous approaching in this place because, you know, you're used to it where you're from. You're the big dog, or you've got a reputation, or it's become kind of natural. But now you're in another place, you know, it feels different. And so forcing yourself to be a beginner again allows you to learn everything differently again. And for me, coming back to Rio after having traveled, I've got way more energy. I've learned a load of stuff, you know, a load of lessons. Those sort of lessons that strike you as epiphanies in the moment, where you're like, damn, it's like I knew that, but now I know it again in a different way. Like that information makes sense experientially and not just intellectually. And so I think, to answer your question directly now, for people coming from, let's say, London, as a lot of my clients do, to come here and then go back to London, they're flying when they get back. Right. Because they've been pushed into, in many ways, pushed into the deep end, right? A new culture, a new way of communicating, opening new neural pathways, learning new ways of being around people. You come back to London and you feel like you're on holiday in your own city. It's like everything is an experiment again, right? The first time I came back to London after 6 months in Rio, I was flying, man. I was flying. I was just, you know, I was talking to everyone. I was switched on. It felt like there was no pressure. There was no, there was no pressure on me from anywhere. I was just free to communicate however I want. And that is the most important thing when it comes to what we teach, right? Social skills and approaching and communicating. You want to have this sense that, no, I'm not a professional. I'm not the best at this. Even to think that I'm not better than anyone else, right? I'm just focused on the individual. I'm going about my day and I'm communicating freely in the way that I want to. At its best, that's what this is, right? It's egoless. It's just pure, unbounded curiosity to meet and get yourself in interesting situations. And traveling to Rio or anywhere else, talking to people and coming back home, you're resetting that curiosity muscle in your mind. And that's what's important.
Yeah, I would agree. That's certainly been my experience. You know, you break the paradigm. You get away, you go somewhere totally different, you break the paradigm. And even if it seems to me it kickstarts your social journey, or it reboots it, right? Because and you're right, you're absolutely right, because we could all get very set in our ways. I mean, I've been now in London for quite a long stretch of time during bloody lockdowns, or certainly during a lot. I mean I've been quite fortunate because I've been able to get out and about a bit, but you know, loads of rubbish restrictions and things. And for sure, you do get stuck in that sort of mental paradigm. You go away, you break the paradigm, and then when you come back, you're bringing a different energy with you, 100%. which likely means people are going to respond to you differently. So yes, because the energy you bring into an interaction is so important, isn't it? Because I mean, I remember years ago, I was going into work every morning in an office, and I used to talk to girls on the way into work on the commute. You know, and I would get phone numbers and things like this. Now, intuitively, you might think, well, that's a terrible place to approach because everyone's busy. They're in a bad mood. It's the morning. But because I was bringing a different energy, girls would sort of open up to it, right? And I was actually had quite a lot of success in doing that. So I think it's very much what you bring with the way that you're coming across affects how 100%. They then respond to you.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that's why one of the more effective, I suppose, activities that you can get a student to do is to give them permission to do as badly as they can, right? Yeah. And like if you tell a guy conversely, like, see how much you can turn this girl off, like see how do whatever you can without being rude or unkind, to see if you can like show the worst side of yourself in this interaction, right? Very often when they go and do that, she's really interested in them because she's thinking like, on the one hand, like this is unusual, right? This isn't how guys normally approach me. He's not trying to impress me. And on the other side, even more than that, she's thinking, why can this guy afford to do badly? Like, why can he afford that I don't like him? When other guys seem not to be able to afford it, right? They need my attention. They need me to like them, right? Whereas this guy can afford to let me go. He can afford to entertain himself and lose my attention. And in doing that, I think people can gain a lot of freedom. So I actually think that's quite a valuable exercise in many ways for beginners to give themselves total permission to mess it up as badly as they can, you know, for the reason that you say. It's because you kind of bring a different energy and you show a different side of yourself. For me, I remember one lesson that I learned about 4 or 5 years ago, even when I was coaching, was like, I had a moment where I was at my absolute worst. I was wearing like tracksuit bottoms. I think I was just overcoming a fever, like blocked nose, tired as fuck, like dead. And I saw a girl and I was just like, oh God, like whatever, like let's go. And I normally wouldn't have done it. You know, I went in at that time and it was so low energy and so chilled, and she could see that I was messed up, right?
Yeah.
But it went really well, and she was like messaging me to hang out. And it was because, again, if you're happy to be seen at your worst, right? You're not putting on your best shirt, spraying yourself with aftershave, trying to look like the man. You're going in when you're at your absolute worst. That's kind of attractive to them because they see that you can afford to be seen like that. And you're not concerned with how they're evaluating you and like whether they care. You don't care that much, right? You like them. You don't need them in that way. And that's powerful.
Yes, absolutely. And it's a bit like various people have talked about, you shouldn't necessarily wait until you're in state in order to go and approach, because being in state is, I mean, if you can get into state, great, but you should still be doing the actions anyway, because, well, why not? And like you say, actually, if you're prepared to be seen at your worst, then that sends a very good message out there about you.
Yeah, I mean, Tusk put it really well. He's been banging on about it for the past month, but he keeps saying passion stems from action, and I do think that's probably the most. I think he's quoted that from someone else, so I don't want to wrongly attribute that, but I think that is the most succinct and effective way of looking at it. It's like you cannot expect to be passionate about the action until you've taken it, right? You have to go before you're ready to go. Yes. And then you will get that positive emotion, you will get that passion once you've helped yourself, once you've given yourself that 0 to 1, that 1 to 100 seems a whole lot more exciting.
Yes, and I mean, how many things does that apply to? Because like there are certainly been times I haven't felt like going to the gym, but then when you're in there and you start, suddenly you start 100%. To get into it, or like going for a run, or starting to do a piece of writing or a piece of work. It's like so yeah, starting is so key, isn't it?
Actually, writing is one of the I would say that social flow and writing flow are the two most pronounced. Like the gym is great when you find a flow and you get into the rhythm and you don't want to leave, you just want to keep lifting, is amazing. But the creativity that comes when you're in writer's flow, right? Like I've written a little bit, you would know more about this than I would, but when you start coming out with words that you actually didn't know you had in your head, but the word appears on the page, it's incredible, right? Like you can find this kind of weird sense of creativity where you're more intelligent than you knew you could be. With writing. And with social flow, it's like you're just on fire, right? You just don't care what anybody thinks about you. You know that everything you go and do is going to go well, right? There's no room for any bad response. It's like you hit. Yeah, that social flow is an amazing place to be, but you can't rely on that.
Yeah. Well, no, it's fantastic. And I always used to say, a few years ago, it would take me about 5 approaches, doing daytime approaches. It would take me about 5 to, I mean, sometimes obviously I get lucky or whatever, but in general, it would take about 5. But then once you've got to that level, you've done the 5, suddenly you're flying. And it's almost as if, even if then something goes wrong, or you say something a bit embarrassing, or you do a joke and it doesn't go down well or whatever, you could handle anything, and that's an amazing place to be. But like you say, that doesn't let you off the hook from doing the first 5 or from doing the one way when you feel crap.
Well, the thing is, it requires that you overcome like intense anxiety, like that social flow. In my case, it usually comes after I've broken out of a really inhibited state. Right. Yeah. And I've had a load of interactions in quick succession, not just approaches, but like maybe I talk to a group of people, a couple of guys, a girl, and after quick succession, you're just there, right? It just comes to you, but it normally comes after a really difficult time. Then comes this amazing freedom. And I think it speaks to the passion stems from action. It's like the more difficult the action was to take, the better the feeling is going to be on the other side of it.
Yeah. Well, and just to touch on the writing, because I'm actually writing a PDF at the moment to go with a little course that I'm putting out, and nice. it's about conversation skills, and it's only about 15,000 words long, which is not really very long in the big scheme of things. But I was sort of procrastinating a bit, and then I was ill, and I was sort of doing dribs and drabs, and then this week I thought, right, I need to get this damn thing finished, and so I was setting my timer for 25-minute increments, and the other day I did I probably did about 5-6 hours work on this thing. Wow. And I smashed through it in 25-minute increments. And some of the stuff that was coming out, I mean, I don't want to big myself up here, but it was better than I perhaps expected it to be. Do you know what I mean? It was like some stuff came out and I was thinking, damn, this is actually pretty good. This is some real value here. But I didn't feel like it at the beginning, though. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't like, I didn't get up in the morning and go, woohoo, I can't wait to, smash out all these words today. But once you hit that flow, it's fucking great.
Yeah, with writing, it's like sometimes you're trying to write a sentence and like you can't even formulate the syntax, like the ways that the words fit together. And then you keep going, right? You're like, oh my God, this is awful. I should give up. I should stop. You keep going. And then like you hit like a 30-minute mark of pushing through and suddenly it's flowing out of you. It's just appearing on the page. Words that you didn't know you knew in a way that formulating them grammatically in a way that you'd forgotten you knew how to. It's like, it's really, really strange and interesting how that happens. And it's just the same with social skills.
Yeah. And that's the real hit actually from something like writing, because you've written something, you're like, damn, that's really good. Or that sentence or that combination of words, that's really good. And it sort of came from somewhere else, if you like. But the problem with writing, as opposed to something like, say, doing drugs or getting drunk, is that it's also kind of hard work. So the high is great, but you have to do the work to get to that high. Do you know what I mean? Whereas if you just do some cocaine or something, then it's a very easy shortcut to getting the hit. If you know what I mean.
Well, that speaks to alcohol and social skills. It's the same, isn't it? It's like, I mean, what I've learned doing this and doing enough nights out, without drinking anything, is that actually alcohol doesn't even improve your social skills. It's just cutting the first 30 minutes of awkwardness out of the night. That's all you're doing. And after that point, the alcohol is purely a hindrance, right? It's like if you don't drink anything and you're used to drinking and you go out, to Barboa Place in Leblon, which is very busy, packed with beautiful people, lots of noise, people talking. If you go there, the first 30 minutes, you're going to feel horrible. You're going to want to go home if you're used to drinking, right? You're going to want to go home. You're going to feel awkward. Your conversation is going to be stilted. You're going to be deeply self-conscious. If you drink a beer in the first 5 minutes, it's going to take the edge off it and your social skills are going to improve. And then you're going to peak after about an hour and a half, where you start to get tired from all the dead carbs and the drunkenness and whatever else. If you just don't drink and you get through 20, 30 minutes of stiffness, you're going to be you can be flying off water for 2 to 3 hours and make that high for yourself that the alcohol gives you artificially. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. And it's worth pushing through for sure. We haven't really touched on social anxiety, although all of this is sort of related to it in a sense. But I mean, like, perhaps we could just briefly sort of bring it round to that, because I mean, I was somebody as and also as well, I'd be interested what you were like as a younger guy, because for me, when I was in my teens and certainly early 20s, my social anxiety was through the roof. I mean, I found it very difficult to socialize. I was kind of introvert anyway, and I quite liked my own company, but also I just found having conversations, even creating eye contact with people, really, really difficult. And I did break out of that. And for me, it happened over quite a long period of time. I did, full disclosure, and I'm not recommending this as advice to anybody, but I did end up sort of going, having some pretty going off the rails a little bit with some of the drink and things, and that it kind of ended up working out, because it did sort of blow things open for me. But I as I say, it's not a healthy way to go. No. But have you suffered from this sort of social anxiety, and what would your general advice be to guys to sort of pull out of it?
Yeah, it's such a broad idea. So I think when I was younger, right, when I was in the teenage years where you're most self-conscious, like for me, it was sort of 13 to 16 was where I was, puberty hits and you become hyper self-conscious. I really cared what people were thinking about me. I never really had this general social anxiety, right? Like I always had friends around me, and it was never that difficult for me to make friends with like the average guy. However, as soon as it came to like girls and women, it wasn't so much, again, general anxiety. It was just a really strong belief that I wasn't good enough. Like a deep felt belief that I was born not to be good enough for this person, right? Like I never have stood a chance. I never will. I'm just not good enough. And when it came to guys, I would see guys who were sort of thought to be cool around this age, and I would just see them as innately, objectively better, right? And myself as worse. And so I was sort of anti-competitive. If I was with a few of my friends and maybe there was a few girls in an environment, I would like push them towards them, right? And I would always be the one, like anti-competitive. I would want everyone else to go first. I've always been someone that's very, I've had to fight for my conscientiousness, for my decisiveness, right? Because it didn't come naturally to me. So I think that was the greatest step I took was actually making decisions for myself and not, I guess, not having this anti-conflict, anti-competitive mindset, which was very innate to me in that time. As far as social anxiety, with women, I had much more social anxiety, and the process of approaching for me, I think, was so inspiring because it was so incredibly weird and difficult, right? Like the first time going up to a girl in the street, the first like 3 or 4 months was like I knew it was going to go badly. Even if it didn't, like in my mind, it was just like, I know that this girl is going to think I'm a weirdo. I know it. I accept that, and I know it, right? And I was proven wrong time and time again, but it still didn't break me out of that, right? I was like, I basically know that she's not going to go for me, and like it took so much time to cement this idea that there is no objective. Like you are worse than this person, you don't deserve this person. Like this is all flexible, this is all malleable.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the greatest thing. Now, so I don't know how that really addresses social anxiety. I did have like actual social anxiety. I had sort of semi-psychosis around 2014.
Okay.
Where I'd gone off the rails a bit as well. I think I'd done a bit of the white powder the night before. And then I've done some, I don't know if am I allowed to mention the names of these things on here?
I think so. Yeah, I don't think that's a problem.
Well, I've done the happy powder that day, and then I smoked something called Black Mamba Ultra, which is some legal cannabis alternative.
Oh, okay.
And I experienced something called depersonalization, which is essentially where you lose all association with yourself as a person. So you look at your hand and you see it and you recognize it because you've seen it before, but you feel no sense of ownership of it. Essentially, it's a state of total, constant, crippling anxiety.
Okay.
And overcoming that was difficult, right? I'd be around my best friend who I've known all my life, and I wouldn't be able to look him in the eye. I didn't know him, right? He was just an animal in the same room as me.
Yeah.
And so overcoming that was a process of re-socializing myself, going out and speaking to anyone, holding eye contact with anyone, and then finding other people who'd experienced the same thing as I have. But I want to answer the question, I think, more as it pertains to the majority of our audience. And actually, I might say something that maybe sound a little contradictory, but the more I've learned about influence and sales, the more I've seen sort of ideas as entities, right? And so for me, more and more on my channel, I talk about anxiety as this sort of idea that the more you think about anxiety and focus on anxiety, the bigger it grows. In the same way as if you see the McDonald's sign of the drive-through and you say, I hate McDonald's, I'm never gonna have McDonald's. Look at those ugly yellow arches, I'm never gonna eat it. Your brain doesn't recognize the negative of the I'm not going to. All it hears is McDonald's, McDonald's, McDonald's. And that idea grows. And then the next thing you know, you find yourself succumbing to the great yellow arches. And I think maybe that's a very simplified example, but I think for a lot of people, they sort of they procrastinate and almost self-sabotage, gets pleasure from being in this state of approach anxiety and AA. And I think it's almost that sort of satisfying self-destruction, that satisfying capping your success for a lot of people focusing on it. What I tell my clients who have a lot of anxiety is almost like a meditation. It's essentially, right, you say you're experiencing this anxiety, but you know it's just hormones. You know it's just chemicals in your body creating the sense. So instead, focus on the girl, right? Who do you see? What's the cause for anxiety, right? There she is. She's 5'10". She's wearing a red dress. She's smiling. She's got this. Just focus on her and now take steps towards her. Walk in the direction of the girl whilst focusing on her. And just like meditation, it's not telling yourself not to think anymore, to destroy thought. It's focusing instead on the experience, right? Meditation is focusing on the breath, on the feeling, on the hearing, on the seeing. In the same way, when you're experiencing social anxiety, what I tell my clients to do is not to stop feeling social anxiety or to break it down. It's to just focus on the action that you need to take, right? Distract your mind from the anxiety by focusing on the goal, focusing on the outcome, and then taking the first little step in that direction. Right. And by doing that, you almost avoid anxiety altogether. And maybe you feel some of the chemicals inside, but your focus is completely on the action that you need to take, and you almost leave no space for anxiety to expand and encompass your experience.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, absolutely. So really, you've explained it much more eloquently than this, but taking action ultimately is the sort of the cure here, if you like, because you can, and I think I like what you said before, because it's almost like what you focus on grows, right? Yeah. And if you focus on, if you're sitting there every day thinking, oh, I'm anxious, that's going to become your reality. Whereas actually what you should be focusing on instead is what are my goals, and then what actions do I need to take to move towards them?
It's exactly that. Like, I think one of the best metaphors for it is to say, like, if you've got to hike a tall mountain and you focus on the great distance between the base and the peak, it's going to seem really intimidating. But if you focus on the peak and say, that's where I'm going, and in order to get there, I need to take one little step and then another and then another, and you get wrapped in the great goal, the big goal that you have for your social life, and the next little step that you need to take, which may in fact be one physical step forward in the direction of the person you want to approach, you never need to focus on that great middle distance, because it is completely consumed by one little step after another. And so I think that's the best metaphor. It's focus on what do you want from your social life? How do you want your social life to look? And what do you need to do right now? What's the smallest step you can take right now in that direction? And that may be leaving the house. Once you've left the house, what's the next step? Look in the eyes of one stranger. What's the next step? Ask someone the time. What's the next step? Extend that conversation, right? Ask if they're from here. What's the next step? Get a phone number, right? And you just build it up step by step by step. And before you know it, you're well on your way to achieving that great.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm totally on board with all of that. And I think if there's one thing that I could have told my younger self well, I suppose there would have been several things, but one of the things I would say is that rejection really doesn't matter. And I think a lot of the anxiety that I had with socializing with women, but also just generally, was a fear that I was going to get rejected, that I would show up, as they say these days, and I just wouldn't be deemed good enough by whoever it was that I was approaching, and that person's opinion of me was a really significant thing, you know. And what I've realized in the years since is that actually it doesn't really matter. Do you know what I mean? It's like it literally doesn't matter. Like if a girl thinks I'm, you know, she thinks I'm hideous or whatever, you know, for me before, that would have been the end of the world, you know, to have to, oh my God, this girl, like, it's like, oh, she, you know, but you realize it's such a big world out there. And just because one random person thinks X about you, it doesn't mean that it's true. And it certainly doesn't mean that everyone thinks it.
No, you're absolutely right.
You know, and it's sort of like, if only I could have realized that earlier, because then you start to have fun with it. Because it's like, okay, well, you know, and just taking, and also as well, just taking small steps. It's better to take a small step than to take no step. So like you say, if you're really socially anxious, just go out and practice creating eye contact with people. That's where you're at.
Whatever's next on your journey, right? Like whatever step you need to take where you are is the step that you need to take. Right. But to come back to your point, like I think you're like I was exactly the same, right? The girl rejected me, it meant that all of the others were going to, because objectively I am not attractive, right? That was was the puzzle, how the puzzle fit together in the mind. I think for me, definitely the experience is so important, right? You learn from your experiences, and the more times you get rejected, the less you care about it, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're also getting accepted, you realize that the rejections aren't a fair reflection of who you are as a person. It's just one person's opinion. But also to understand that we've evolved, literally our hardware in our brains has evolved from communities of 100 to 150 people, where if you get rejected by a woman in that 100 and 150 people to 150 people, and you're never going to meet anyone outside of that tribe, that was real cause for concern, because it meant you might not be able to reproduce. You might not be able to pass on your genes and reproduce. And, you know, it's very scientific and maybe a little bit heavy, but just to say, like, I feel this way, like rejection feels this way because I've evolved from a different time, and my hardware has not evolved as fast as society has evolved, right?
Yeah.
In society today, if you get rejected, there are limitless possibilities. The hardware that I've evolved with has adapted to only ever being in an environment with a maximum of 150 people. And so we've kind of got to work on ourselves to overcome the unnecessary baggage that we've inherited from our ancestors.
That's true. That's true. And because I genuinely believed as a teenager, I told myself anyway, maybe I didn't genuinely believe it, but I told myself, look, if you ask out this girl who works at the cafe and she says no, that basically means that you are, because women are women, they all like the same sort of thing. So if you're deemed to be not good enough by one girl, that means that you're not good enough. Full stop. Because you haven't passed the test. You know, your genes will be weeded out of existence and all of that stuff. Now, obviously, mathematically, that's rubbish, because there are how many billion people now? 8 billion people on the planet, or whatever it is.
Who knows?
You know, there's a lot of people, right? So obviously, mathematically, that's bollocks. But you can really fall into that mindset, can't you? And I've lost my thread now, but basically you need to break out of that. Oh, the other thing is as well, just circling back to what you said before about, if you're sitting in a small town now watching this, and you've been in that small town for the last year, and there's been lockdowns and blah blah blah, your paradigm, your perception of the world is very limited by that location. Whereas you get on the plane, you go to Rio, you go to London, you go to Moscow, whatever it is, it blows open, because you suddenly see, damn, there's a hell of a lot of people out there, and they have different opinions, you know? And it's like, you know, I've been rejected obviously many times, but I've also been accepted many times by extremely attractive women as well. And you realize that it isn't this one size fits all. It's very, very changeable depending on who you meet and your energy and who you're with and all of the rest of
their energy, man. Like it's not even to mention that, like, you know, one girl might see you and have like this instant opinion of like, oh, this guy looks like a slob. He, you know, he probably lives with his parents still and like doesn't have anything going for him. And she might see you laughing with your friends in a park. The same girl might have seen you the next day laughing with your friends in a park, kicking a football around with, you know, a couple of girlfriends around. And she might think, damn, like, I wonder if that guy's going to look at me and want to talk to me. Like, we don't even, as guys, we're very focused on, you know, at what we can change, which is quite right. But we also need to take into account the fact that it's just other people's perception of you in one moment. It's not even like a fixed impression. Like, this girl doesn't find you attractive, never has, never could, never will. It's just right now, right? It's based on her emotions and her hormones and her experience. So like, we shouldn't take too much autonomy from actually the other individual, right?
Yeah, and that's absolutely correct. And I've certainly had experiences, maybe I guess maybe you have too, where I've actually been, you know, some girls turn me down, and then I've met her again in a different circumstance, and then suddenly it's on, you know. So it's changeable even within that individual, you know.
Yeah, 100%.
That's happened.
So basically, the potted version of that is it means nothing what somebody else that you don't know or isn't a close friend of you thinks about. It means absolutely nothing. And to consciously recognize that in the moment, this means nothing, laugh about it and move on, is the way to combat that, right?
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, it's one of those things, perhaps it's a bit easier to say than it is to embody, but that is the reality. That if you understand, at least intellectually understand, that is the reality. So even if it does sting a little bit if you get rejected, well, okay, but the reality is it doesn't matter. You know, exactly. And I think that's pretty irrefutable, really.
No, I agree.
Well, listen, mate, it's been awesome. It's been a fantastic chat. We have been on over an hour now, and I know you're obviously in a beautiful place, and you've probably got stuff to do. So, you know, tell the guys where they can find you, what you've got coming up, anything that you know may be of use to them.
Yeah, man. Just to reiterate, one guy, I think Fletcher 007 said, +1 to Troy for being a legit person in this space, and I've got to reiterate that, man. Like, it's a real pleasure talking to someone who is, for lack of a less basic term, like a normal guy acting in this space, because I do think that I don't know if I suppose we call it an industry. I do think that we're really lacking just normal kind of cool guys, honest, like normal guys who are just talking about this and not donning thy feathery cap. So like, yeah, I just got to reiterate that. Thanks for having me on, man. And I appreciate you being just a genuine source of information and inspiration for the guys out there. And this chat's been long overdue. I hope we do it again in the future. My 100%. links, admin@fluid.social is my email address. Just drop me an email there and we can set up a call. Troy, if it's all right, I'll send you as well a link to my Calendly page, because what I'm doing at the moment is I basically offer a 30-minute breakthrough call to anyone who wants to talk to me, and I essentially give you 30 minutes where I answer any of your questions, help you through whatever you want to talk about for free. So I'll drop you that link as well, and if you could just, I don't know, chuck that wherever is visible and convenient, that would be cool. And yeah, other than that, admin@fluid.social. Sorry. Oh yeah, so admin@fluid. Just a dot in between fluid and social.
I mean, if you send me your links over, I'll put them all in the description.
For sure.
So to the channel and everything else, and I'll write them in. I hadn't actually set up the like the thumbnail for this and so on yet, but I'll do that and I'll put all the links in. So
cool,
it's a bit of a busy day, but
sure.
Fantastic, mate. Sorry, was there anything?
No, that's all. That's all. Just it's been a real pleasure. I appreciate you having me on the show, man. I love what you're doing, and I look forward to talking to you again the other way around.
Vice versa, man. And it's been a great chat, and you know, I hope that we get to meet up soon, either in London or indeed over in Brazil, which I'm sure will happen quite soon.
Oh, so, man, just drop me. I was going to say, if you want to, whenever you want to come out to Brazil, literally just drop me a message, man, and I'll set you up over here. Sure.
Great. Yeah, 100%, mate. 100%. Looking forward to it. Cool. Okay. Well, as far as I'm concerned, if you just hit subscribe to the channel, give us a like, give us a comment in the comments box below. All helps with the algorithm. I'm actually going to be back tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. UK time, 11:30 a.m. EST. We're doing the show Rule Zero on this channel, so we'll have Rollo Tomasi and Rich Cooper and some of the other guys on there as well. So so do make sure that you join us live for that tomorrow. And that's it, really. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks if you're watching this on the replay. We'll see you again very soon. Bye.